Welcome to the Verdin Verdict Sports Show. I'm your host, Jacob Verdin. And without further ado, let's dive right into LSU's 2023 predictions. Big year under the first year with Coach Brian Kelly. A lot of things changed for the Tigers, for the better, I would say. I think that going forward for the Tigers, the recruiting class definitely going to be a big boost. Number six recruiting class in the country. Add that with the number four transfer portal class, and things got better for the Tigers pretty much overnight. One of the more recent transfer portal additions is going to help the Tigers be legitimate in the running game. The running back room is kind of a question mark for the Tigers here, I'd say. You got John Emery questioning on whether or not Josh Williams has an injury. Armani Goodwin is kind of banged up. It's going to be interesting to see how Frank Wilson and how LSU, Brian Kelly, Mike Denbrock, how these guys get that running game ironed up. Jayden Daniels is going to be able to assist in some ways because he's probably the best running quarterback that the SEC has to offer. You got Bryce Young gone, Hendon Hooker gone, Stetson Bennett gone. Not a lot of legitimate elite quarterbacks left. Still have Will Rogers. You still have KJ Jefferson, but with the departure of last year's draft class, I think that the SEC is pretty wide open in terms of who's going to be able to seize it. So let's go ahead and dive in. Everybody knows we start off the year with the most highly anticipated rematch in college football for the LSU Tigers. It's going to be Florida State. Everyone wants to see us get our revenge. We're going on the revenge tour. A lot of things happened last year against Florida State that were kind of unforeseen circumstances that made LSU, scratch their heads and wonder how are we going to get out of this position? How are we going to be able to push forward when things like this strike us when we were least expecting? And you know what? They pushed forward. They pushed forward a hell of a lot more than anyone would have expected. If you would have said LSU is going to creep into a double-digit win season after losing in New Orleans in week one, everyone would have laughed. But guess what? They did it last year, and quite frankly, I believe they can do it again this year. Florida State rematch. Florida State end of the year ranked the highest in the ACC. Now, I'm not sitting here knocking the Seminoles. They're a great team. Ended rank 11 in the top 25 for the Associated Press. And I think that Jordan Travis isn't anything to scoff at. He had more passing yards than JD5, more passing touchdowns, and he was pretty close in the rushing touchdown category. If you want to look at his rushing stats, Jordan Travis had 2 games with multiple rushing touchdowns, a lot similar to what we saw JD5 do. If you look at their total rushing touchdowns, Jayden had 11 and Jordan had 7. So I think that Florida State, they're not going to be exactly alike to LA bring to the table with the matchups and the talent as a whole, but they're going to be a pretty tough matchup, especially in week one. It's kind of interesting. We get them in Louisiana, which I last year, and then now they get us in Florida, which is school in the state, such as Ole Miss and a Mississippi State type battle. Even in Alabama, you got Auburn and Alabama. Good luck to Hugh Freeze and Auburn trying to out recruit Nick Saban. Those type of battles are rough, so that's going to explain as to why Florida State wasn't able to get all the big guys. Florida's a pretty big state in terms of recruits, but when you got the Gators and Billy Napier sitting there with the SEC, with all the history, with the big stadium, the great culture, and I mean, honestly, some of the best uniforms, it's kind of hard to pull against that. However, Florida State, pretty decent game. I think LSU is going to be able to get a win. It might not be a huge stomping win, but it'll be a lot better of a game than next year or than last year. Moving into the Grambling State game, let's be real, guys. I think this might be one of the best games for LSU in terms of their offensive production all season. This could be a 50-plus point game. Jayden Daniels could probably only play one quarter. We could see Ricky Collins as soon as the third quarter for this game. Wouldn't be surprised if LSU goes out and completely dog walks them. I'm going to say this is a 2-0 start. Moving on to Mississippi State. This is where things get interesting. A lot of people are going to want to click the stream right off whenever I say this, but I think Mississippi State is one of the more underrated teams in the SEC for next season. Now, before I lose you, let me go ahead and explain it. So they finished third in the SEC West, and of course, everyone knows the top dog was LSU. However, Will Rogers touted a pretty impressive SEC second place leading mark with passing yards. Also beat A&M, beat Arkansas, things that we had trouble with. A&M defeated us in the final. Arkansas made it pretty close, 3-point win for more than 2 touchdowns. However, the loss to, well, excuse me, not the loss, but just the whole way that the defense has had to shift in a sense where They lose this cornerback that was probably the heart and soul of the defense. They don't get as much of a returning production as they probably wanted when then you're looking like in comparison to other SEC teams. Look at Bama, number one recruiting class again. Look at LSU, number six recruiting class. They didn't get to pull in the guys and didn't get to keep on going with that Mississippi State recruiting trail. Like we were saying earlier, they got a pretty hard college to fight against in Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, who always puts up a fight and is honestly one of the most beloved coaches in the SEC West. So I think that's going to explain for their measly, what is it, 26 overall recruiting class, 45th overall transfer class. Not great. Not great. But I will say this about